of his life. There's an interesting interaction between the Jewish people and Hashem. If you look at the wording in the verses, it says that God saw the war of Midian as avenging the Jewish people. Take vengeance for the sake of the Jewish people. God's foremost concern was the people. Whereas the Jewish people, it says that we fought this war avenging God because they had undermined godliness in this world. So it's interesting that Hashem is motivated for the needs of the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are motivated for the needs, as it were, of Hashem. So it's the best form of a relationship. When there's a relationship and each side is looking for the need of the other. It just reminds me of the fact that when we make a bracha on food, on bread, the bracha is hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We talk about God being the provider of food from the land. When we look at this verse from which that wording of the blessing is derived, it is the paragraph 104, Psalm 104, which we recite every Rosh Chodesh, Baruchi Nafshi, and the wording there is that God has given us the potential, lehotzi lechem min haaretz, to bring out bread from the soil. So when God says the words, he's saying, I've given you the opportunity because you, my people, lehotzi lechem min haaretz, you are the ones that bring bread from the earth. Which means that we have a responsibility to plow and to plant and to reap and to ensure that we fulfill our responsibility to bring provisions into this world. But after all of our effort and everything that we've achieved, when we say the bracha, we amend the wording that was derived from this verse in Tehillim, and we don't say that we have brought out this food from the ground, but we say, Baruch atah Hashem, blessed art you Hashem. Hamotzi, you are the one that brought out the bread from the land. There's a partnership. And God emphasizes the role of the human being, and the human being emphasizes the blessing that we derive from Hashem. And when we do that on both sides, then we have a great partnership. Hashem giving us the potential and the blessing, and us fulfilling our roles as builders in this world that God has placed us to achieve our mission. Let's go and talk about the 2.5 tribes and the fact that they were viewed by Moshe Rabbeinu initially as detractors. In fact, he's upset with them. He says to them, you are recreating the failure of the spies so many years ago who didn't want to go into the land. So don't take away, don't dishearten the people as the spies did 40 years ago. And they then respond and they say, no, you're completely misreading us. We are going to be in front. We're leading from the front. We're going to battle all the way up front. And only after the last Jews have settled in the land will we go back to our families. And there are a lot of details that we learn from the whole story of the 2.5 tribes. In fact, there's a whole section in the Talmud that talks about conditions that are made even in contractual law, that the wording of a condition should be said from both sides, meaning that if you make an act or a sale or something that you're doing conditional, you actually word it both ways. If this is done, then this will be the result, and if this is not done, this will not be the result. Well, the result will be different. You actually put both sides of the possibilities of where the condition is fulfilled, and then what would transpire if the condition was not fulfilled. And we learn it from the 2.5 tribes, because when they are told that they are able to take the land on the Transjordan, on the other side of the Jordan, Moses says to them, if you will go up in front and lead the battle and do exactly as you've said, then you can have the land. And if you do not, then you do not get that land. So we actually learn out contractual wordings for contracts that apply to Jewish law from the story of the 2.5 tribes. But there are many other details. For example, when Moshe Rabbeinu comes back with a solution, he basically tells them exactly what they said in the first place. They said, we're ready to lead the battle. We'll build pens for our animals and our families. our wives and children, then we will lead in battle, and then we'll come back to our families after the battle. And then Moshe Rabbeinu tells them to do exactly that. And they answer, we will do as Moshe Rabbeinu, as Kasher Adoini Doiver, exactly as you, Moses, have said, we will fulfill. But that's in fact what they said up front. What Moshe Rabbeinu said was what they said. So they could have said, we will do as we said initially. But if you look at the words, there are a few very critical differences in their wording and in Moshe Rabbeinu's wording. For example, one of them is the fact that when they tell Moshe Rabbeinu that we will take care of our stock and our family, they put it in that order. They said we'll build pens for our animals and places to live for our wives and children. And Moshe Rabbeinu, when he comes back to them, he changes the order appropriately. And he says, make homes for your families, for your wife and children, and also take care of your animals. He switches it around. Rashi, and extended in a great essay by Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, says that this actually is a deep insight into priorities. Sometimes we are so motivated by things in our lives that our assets come before our families. And Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, be very careful with your wording, because your first priority is to your families and then to your assets, and make sure that you got it right, because you can get it all mixed up. We have an interesting interaction when a person has a son and needs to perform the duty of Pidyon Haben at the age of 30 days. The firstborn son has to be redeemed. And the interaction is actually looks like a charade, because what the Kohen says to the father, he says, these are the 5 coins of silver, and this is your son. Money or the bucks? Do you want your son, or do you want the 5 pieces of silver, the 5 coins of silver? Not once have I ever been at a Pidyon Haben where the father has said, you know what, I'll take the coins. I'm out of here. Never. Thank God, never. So obvious is the answer that one wonders why the question is even framed in the first place. Why would we even say to the father, what do you want? Obviously, any father will say, I want my child. Not interested in the 5 coins. But I saw a beautiful insight about the question that has to reverberate through our minds forever. At that moment, everybody's as clear as anything what the priority is. But when the kid's 5 years old, or 10 years old, 15 years old, and the father is building his business and he's extending his reach, and he's now, Baruch Hashem, a very successful business person. And the question that is in front of him is, do I spend 5 minutes with my child, or do I spend another hour at work? And suddenly, what was a crystal clear question asked when the child was 30 days old becomes a little bit more blurred, a little bit more gray. We're not actually sure we're going to spend more of our time. And the question that is put to the father then is a question that we should always put to parents and to ourselves. Where are my priorities? How much am I spending with my family? How much am I spending on my assets? And one of the details that Moshe Rabbeinu turns around is, don't think of your livestock and then your families. Don't even say the words in that order. Make sure that when you speak, you have prioritized your family before anything else. And suddenly the 2.5 tribes are no longer detractors taking away. They are actually showing tremendous bravery and strength in wanting to lead the Jewish people in the process of taking the land. When they actually talk about the watching over the assets that were captured, it says that you will make sure to give the tithe and you'll make sure to divide up. And then it says, and you'll be guiltless towards God and towards Israel. And one of the origins that we learn, that when one handles public funds, there should be trustees, more than one person, is derived. One of the origins is from this verse, that it is very important, if we're ever in a position that we have access to public funds, it should be holy and sacred to the degree that we don't take care of these things alone. That there's always 2 people. In fact, in the temple, where anybody had to handle the half shekels and money, the clothing had no pockets, and there were no bags, and there was no possibility not only for a person to think of taking, there wasn't the possibility of somebody else thinking that somebody else might have taken. So above board, this honesty and being absolutely clear in the way we handle public funds is also derived from here. This is the priorities story that we spoke about before. I want to move on to journeys, which was something that we mentioned we're going to be dealing with. The first thing is that there were 42 journeys out of Egypt. And then there were technicalities. The first 11 journeys happened in the first year, and the last 10 journeys happened in the 40th year, which means that 19 journeys happened in 38 years. So we often think there were 42 journeys, 40 years in the desert, more or less a journey a year. It wasn't. There were times in the first year that there were more often, last year. But in the 38 middle years of their sojourns in the desert, they only moved 19 times. Now, it was a very complicated process to move, to journey, because when you had to journey, you had to take down the whole sanctuary, you had to put it up, you had to, it was a very laborious, a very challenging, difficult time to go through. But we see that God had mercy on the Jewish people, and he didn't move them around so many times. In fact, only 19 times in 38 years, because of God's care for us. But these journeys become difficult to understand, even in the introductory words. These are the 42 journeys out of Egypt, because we know that geographically it didn't take 42 journeys to get out of Egypt. It would have taken them one journey to get out of Egypt. On the one side of the border was Ramses. On the other side of the Egyptian border was the first city that they set up, or town that they came to, which they called Sukkot, for the temporary structures that they put up there. So it was one journey that it took to get out of Egypt. They left Ramses, and they came to Sukkot, and they were out of Egypt. So why would the Torah describe the journeys out of Egypt as being 42 journeys? So what we have to unpack over here is that these journeys are not only the biblical journeys of our forefathers in the desert. These are very symbolic and very important journeys that relate to all of us in our lives, the fact that they are constantly journeys. And the journeys are constant journeys out of Egypt. What is Egypt? Egypt is in Hebrew Mitzrayim, and the word Mitzrayim means limitation, restriction, confinement, because it was the place of our slavery, but it also represents a state of mind that is less than what one is able to achieve. So what it is saying is true. They geographically had moved out of Egypt geographically into a place that was outside of Egypt in the first journey. But in the process of constantly expanding and growing, and not being trapped in the limitations of yesterday, because Egypt is not only the place where the pharaohs lived, it represents the place inside of ourselves that Pharaoh lives. Pharaoh is that element of self that is arrogant, that wants to stand apart from God, that has its own mission and purpose, and all of those elements in ourselves that debilitate us from doing the right thing, that hold us back, inhibit us. So in those journeys of life, it takes one journey to leave geographical Egypt, but then tomorrow, what was our destination from yesterday and was our goal and what we saw as liberation, in fact, the day goes by and we grow, and suddenly there's a new horizon. The horizon constantly moves, and there's new places to grow. And if we are merely satisfied with the achievements and the attainments of our goals of yesteryear, then we will remain in the prison, in the limitations, in the inhibited, stunted place of not wanting to continue to grow. Every day is an opportunity to grow. And yesterday's liberation becomes tomorrow's Mitzrayim, because there are new horizons that have to be achieved. I've often mentioned what I heard personally from Rabbi Eloi, that he once walked past a store that sold bridal gear for weddings. And he looked in the window, and they were trying to sell the dress, so they wanted to get the passerby into a romantic moment. And so the poem that was placed in front of the gorgeous wedding dress was, "I love you today, much more than I loved you yesterday, but not nearly as much as I will love you tomorrow." Oh, said Rabbi Eli, nothing is for nothing. There's got to be some message why a rabbi walking past the window for bridal gear would read such a poem. And he said, this is the story. This is what we say every morning in davening when we turn to Hashem. Every morning when we say Modeh Ani, what we're saying to Hashem is, I love you today, Hashem, much, much more than I loved you yesterday. I'm older, I've grown, I have new opportunities, I have a better understanding. So today is much more than yesterday, but not nearly as much as tomorrow. Because if this is where I'm going to sit and find my destination, then I could become bound to a new prison, a prison of my mind, a limited, stunted definition of what my achievements could be. And I need to think big. I need to think out of the box. I constantly have to grow. So these 42 journeys of the Jewish people out of Egypt, biblical journeys, actually become very indicative of our movement from the restrictions of our past or of our present to find the promised land, to find what it is that our goals are and to achieve our goals and to realize that there are many, many journeys out of Egypt. Because just when we think we've arrived, we're at a brand new launching place to be able to achieve a better tomorrow. And that's how we have to look at the journeys of the Jewish people, and that's how we have to look at our own lives, constantly having opportunities to develop and to grow. And therefore, there are lots of details that we're going to take out of these 42 journeys. For example, the Baal Shem Tov said that the 42 stations from Egypt to the Promised Land are replayed in the life of every individual Jew. Our soul's journey from its descent to earth, which is certainly a Mitzrayim, a limited place and space and life for a soul to enter into when it begins its birth, all the way to return to its source and to its strength. Every single day of life is a journey. And we've got to see ourselves as being part of this important journey. And when we look at the wording, we actually see insight into the way the journey should take place. For example, it says, these are the journeys as they journeyed to encamp and as they encamped to journey. Many commentaries, the Kli Yakar, famous classical commentary, also the Sfat Emes, talks about the fact that there are different parts to our journeys. We journey to encamp and we encamp to journey, meaning that sometimes we have a clear ambition. We're journeying to reach a particular place and we know exactly where that place is and what we want to achieve. And sometimes we simply want to journey out because we're not happy with where we are. So we have an ambition of leaving where we are more so than having a clarity of where we want to arrive at. And both of these important elements of our journey need to be evaluated and clarified, like we do every time we use the GPS, every single time. The first thing it needs to know is your location. It clarifies where you are, and then it clarifies where do you want to go to. What is your point of destination? If you don't have clarity of where you are and where you want to go, then it is useless. The GPS will not even begin to give you any roadmap in life. We have to know where we are, we have to know where we're going. And where we are is not just that I'm on Curry Street in Oakland or wherever it is. What's my standing? What's my station? Where am I in my Judaism? What is my level that I've achieved? Where am I up to when it comes to tefillin, or when it comes to Shabbos, or when it comes to keeping kosher? Where am I up to in my journey? And what is my journey for tomorrow? And if I only have the one, if one has an ambition and says, oh, I want to be like Moshe Rabbeinu, look at how righteous and special he was, this is my role model, I want to be like Moses. That's a great destination to have, but it's probably going to be irrelevant to your tomorrow because your next turn out of your driveway isn't to be like Moshe Rabbeinu. It's to be one step better than yesterday. So know where we are. What is my standing? Where am I today? And what is my tomorrow going to be in terms of one step, achievable, attainable destination that is clear, and therefore I can grow. And tomorrow, that is going to be the starting point for my new journey. But I have to have a clarity of where I am and where I want to go. The next very detailed element of the journeys is that every place is mentioned twice. It says, Vayis'u, and they traveled from this place, Vayavoyu, and they came to that place. And then it says, Vayis'u, from that place, they traveled from that place, and they came to the next. So every town, every 42 destinations, every one of them is mentioned twice. Once as a place that they embarked to, and the next verse says, and this is the place that they embarked from. So every place is mentioned twice. Many of the commentaries speak about the fact that the places that we enter in life should become uplifted and change by virtue of our visit and our sojourn through there. We have a role to play, and we have a mission and a possibility of affecting every place that we go to. And when we pass through a town, or through a station, or through a level, it should somehow cause that place to be different from the way we found it. Because we did a mitzvah there, we said a bracha there, we did something favorable for another human being, we did an act of kindness. So somehow we have impacted on that place. And that is what some of the commentaries say, is that the place is mentioned twice because it is different when we leave it from when we found it. It should be different. It should be a new place by virtue of the fact that we passed through it. There should be somehow a telltale. There should be some kind of residual impact that has happened by virtue of us passing through. And more than that, not only should there be a difference in the place that we pass through, maybe it should be a difference in us. Because when we arrived in that place, it's very different to the way we left that place. Not only the place is different, but we should be different. We should have an increased, developed identity and connection to Hashem. By virtue of every experience in life, we should be able to grow and to develop and to be more uplifted. That's the challenge of journeys, to constantly see that we are mahalchim, we are the ones who constantly grow. When the verse tells us, I've placed you to be the walkers amongst those who stand. I don't know if this is where Johnny Walker got his advert from, not to mention what's prohibited these days, but the commentaries explain that angels, as high as they are and as high as they fly, they are considered stationary. And human beings are considered the walkers, meaning that we can grow. Angels can't grow. They are predetermined, pre-programmed. They are actually placed for missions to be fulfilled, but they cannot develop because they can't go through challenges. The Torah was given to us, not to angels. We are the walkers. We are the ones who travel and sojourn. And every single day has to be a journey of growth and development and clarity, so that we're not walking around in circles, that we're not walking and walking and walking. We say at the end of the day, where are we? And we're back exactly where we were before. I don't know if anyone's done the exercise, but I was actually doing it tonight. I was looking back at some old documents, and in fact, I was going through some old emails, and there were certain details that we as a shul and as a committee of the shul were dealing with 10 years ago. And the interesting thing is that some of the things don't change. We're actually dealing with similar issues again and again. And I'm sure we could all look at it in our lives. If we look back at what was it that we wanted 10 years ago, and how many of those things have we really graduated from? I once did a leadership course at Bar Ilan University with the faculty of the Torah Academy. And there was a leadership course that ended in the following way. The person who led it said, I want you to write a letter where you want to be in a year's time. And we all thought about it. We had time, space. Like what, realistically, not like, I want to climb Mount Everest. Like what do you want in a year's time? What is your year program? Where do you want to be in a year's time? And privately and individually, we wrote what it is. And then we were encouraged to fold up the piece of paper. They gave us envelopes, and we put our addresses on the envelope. And I forgot about it, as I guess most people did. But the next Rosh Hashanah, I got something in the mail. And it looked like my own handwriting. And it was. I saw that I had a letter from myself. And I opened it up, and sure enough, it was what I had written a year before at the Bar Ilan conference. And it was a very humbling moment. It was a humbling moment because suddenly I had to confront the reality that I had a big reach. I'd really thought of great ideals and goals, but honestly speaking, how many of those had I achieved? How many of those had I accomplished? And that was something that was a very good Erev Rosh Hashanah experience, but all of us to think about the journeys of life and what do we want to achieve and where do we want to get to and how much clarity is there in ensuring that there is constantly a process of development and growth in our lives. And that is what the second portion talks about and the conclusion of the book of Bamidbar, and in a sense, the conclusion of the story of the desert, because immediately after that, we have the repetition of the Torah in the book of Devarim, but actually not much more storyline. I just want to talk about the end with this final detail, that there was a story of the cities of refuge, and that is that if a person inadvertently had killed somebody else, made a mistake and killed somebody, he had to go to a city of refuge where he would be protected from any vengeance that the family might want to take against him because he had done this by mistake. And there are many details about the city of refuge, that it has to be well signposted, because it was an embarrassing question to go over to a guy on the street and say, "Excuse me, how do I get to the city of refuge?" Because immediately that would put a light up on your forehead saying, "I've just killed somebody inadvertently and I've got to get there." Like, why would anybody be looking for a city of refuge? Only under very specific circumstances. So we don't want a person to have to ask questions how to get there. It should be signposted. And the roads have to be cleared. And you have to build proper roads so that it's easy to get there. And then there were many other details that had to be provided for the person who had to go into this place of the city of refuge. And the Chassidus explains that this is not just talking about the sin, the mistake of a city, of a person who had been killed by mistake. It's talking about life mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all fail in areas. We all transgress something that we know we shouldn't have. And the city of refuge is a place that Hashem gives us to rehabilitate ourselves and to fix ourselves up and to bring people back home. And it's the words of Torah. It's to find a roadmap that the person can find a haven in which to rehabilitate his or her life. And it is in the words of Torah. So we need to signpost the journey to Torah. And we have to create roadways to get there. And we have to put an effort in making sure that it's easy for the person who wants to get there to get there. And today, Torah and outreach in Torah is something that most expressions of Judaism have embraced. But times not so long ago, it was very maverick when the Rebbe spoke about sending people into faraway places to find souls that had been distracted and need to be brought back. People said, let them find their own way back. Let them, they're the ones who sin. Why do we worry about such people? Why do you care to ask somebody if he wants to put on tefillin? Let him come to the shul and knock on the door. And the city of refuge reminds us how we have to create an environment which ensures and it helps and makes it easy for somebody to make their way home. So we've spoken a lot about journeys, and all of us have journeys to embark on. Nobody knows the next journey for ourselves better than we ourselves. It is good to have a mashpia or somebody that one can approach, who knows us and can give us objective advice as to what our goals should be. We all need that. Masei l'charav, we need somebody who can teach us, somebody who can advise us, but we all have journeys to go on. And the worst thing is to simply be what we are for the rest of our life, because that's where we were. We got here, and this is where I live, and this is where I am. Every single one of us can grow, and we should think about one mitzvah that we can do tomorrow that's going to take us one step closer to what it is that can be the promised land in our life. I thank you all for joining us, and please God, we'll continue our journey beyond this week. Let everyone have a wonderful week. And one of the advantages of a difficult time, this very difficult time that we're going through, is that we have opportunities to study Torah. Look, my shiur that I give on Wednesdays when it was prior to COVID was much smaller than this one. So we've got to always think of what we can derive that is positive and that can make tomorrow better than today. Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming. Have a good night. God bless.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Yeah, just send my regards to Shmuley. I'm enjoying getting his Rambam things every morning.
Great. I actually enjoy them as well. And he's doing it early now, so we can get it before davening even. Try and join the list of Shmuley's quick Rambam, Sefer Mitzvahs from the Rambam, a journey over the year, which will cover 613 commandments. It's about 3 minutes every morning. If you haven't joined, try it. Nice to see you, Jeff Leventhal. I only noticed that you're here with us now. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Sam or Jenny. Lynette, thank you, Basil. Gerald, Philip, thank you for being here. Cedric, thank you, Peter. See you on the road. Percy, thank you, Barry. Thank you, Stan. Good to see everybody. God bless. Bye-bye.